Hi, everybody. I'm PJ Kwong, host of the Sports Clamor podcast that is brought to you by Community. Today, I am super excited because I have all to myself one of my all-time favorite people, none other than Malcolm Kelly, who's an author, who's a creator, longtime journalist, really an interesting voice in the sports world, and also the founder and head of the sports journalism postgraduate program at Centennial College. Malcolm Kelly, welcome.
Hey, how are you? When you said I was one of your all-time favorite people, I was looking over my shoulder. Thought there might have been somebody else here,
What people need to know, full disclosure, is that you and I have known each other a very long time.
Yes, we have. Oh my God in heaven.
And we don't even agree on everything. That's for
No,
darn
we
sure.
don't.
And I also worked for you in the sports journalism program for a few years.
You did.
I'm a big admirer of what it is that you've been able to accomplish, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. You're also an author. So just talk to me a little bit about your book before we turn the corner and go to the sports world.
Okay, well, my book is Sprog. It's a novel of Bomber Command. It's set in 1941 in Southern Ontario. It tells the story of the kids coming out of high school and who are joining the Royal Canadian Air Force to learn to fly, but it gets them before they go to war. So it gets them before 17,000 of them are not coming home.
Right.
And it tells about who they were as people. So it talks about their music and their films and their pop culture and their comic books and their sports and their total inability to get a girl and all of the things that made them who they were at the time. And we're doing, and we run 96, I think as of yesterday, it was 95% positive reviews on Amazon, including
Wow.
More than 60% 5 stars. So
Fantastic.
part of that. And as you can see from over my left shoulder, I really like cars.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah. Now, listen, speaking of positive reactions, you have a career of positive reactions coming your way. I want to get a little bit of a sense of your career history. So you and I
Sure.
both ended up attending university in the same place at the same time. And I know that you were on the football team, and I know that sports have been a big part of your life. But you turned the corner and started in journalism. So talk to me a little bit about the early part of your career.
Well, I did all of the university newspapers, things, that sort of stuff that you do. And then, but my first job was in beautiful downtown Midland, Ontario, for 2 years as the sports editor of the Midland Free Press, which was in North Simcoe. And of course, we were 2 miles down the road from Penetang. So the first skater I covered was Brian Orser.
Who? No, I'm kidding.
Um,
Two-time Olympic silver medalist Brian Orser.
Yes, and world champion
And
Brian
world champ.
Orser.
Yep.
And
2007.
so I got to see when he was. I was a very young journalist. He was a very young skater. So after that, I did 2 years in pro basketball in communications. Then I did 10 years at the late regretted, terribly late, terribly missed Town Crier newspapers.
Yep.
In Central Toronto, which was one of the largest community monthly groups in North America. And everywhere there was a rich person, as the joke went. And that's where I spent 10 years with my mentor, Harry Goldhar. And then I did 2 years doing Raptors and Blue Jays for Canadian Press.
Wow.
And then I did 7 years of the National Post. And when the National Post left me, on August the 30th, 2005 at 10:11 in the morning, not that I remember, I went to CBC Sports.ca on their in their sports department. And I did 12 years there as a weekend desker and a national feature writer and an occasional figure skating co-commentator with PJ Kwong. And in 2009, I also started, with great help from in the industry, the postgraduate sports journalism program at Centennial College, which is still going along fine despite rumors.
And you know what? I've got to say, I don't know what's going on. It's probably too early in the morning for me, but I said Brian Orser was world champion in 2007,
You did.
87.
You
I
notice how nice I was not to correct you?
Do you know what you should have? Because you should have said, Kwong, what are you talking about? Anyway, but as it came out of my mouth, I thought, that's not even a little bit right. Anyway, 1987. So I know that part of your, let's call it mandate at the postgraduate program for sports journalism is to be able to turn out journalists of a very high caliber, and they're covering sports. So part of what we're talking about in the Sports Clamor podcast is the fact that I am seeing a trend across many sports in Canada. And the trend is that they're having difficulty growing the grassroots. So there are lots of sports. I was talking to a rowing person yesterday, and there are not a lot of sort of high quality rowers who are in the pipeline. I know about figure skating, that the results are very sort of uneven in terms of international figure skating. And part of it can be traced back to not a lot going on in terms of grassroots development. It's a challenge. So this is not a shot in any way, but over your many years of covering sports, do you see that trend? Do you share my point of view? What are your thoughts?
I do.
You can elaborate.
Oh, can I elaborate? I'm sorry. I thought my job here was just to agree with you. I'm sorry. I beg your
As
pardon.
if.
We got that completely wrong. Yeah, I do, but and we in our pre-interview for this show, we disagreed on some points, but I come from certain perspectives, and one of
Yep.
the perspectives I come from is that I am very proud to be one of the co-founders of the North Toronto Baseball Association,
Yep.
under an amazing couple, Tim and Maureen Arnaud, who brought us together in '86, and we got the whole thing started. And the reason that that Tim wanted to start it in the first place was because there wasn't enough room over at the Leaside Association for the rapidly growing number of young people in North Toronto. So they started their own, and now it has since grown. I haven't been involved for 30 years, but it has since grown into one of Ontario's largest. So I come from that perspective. I also come from the perspective that right from the beginning, I set out as one of my goals in journalism to promote women's sports, to
Okay.
promote girls in sports, and to help them in whatever way that I could, by pushing within the journalism industry to give more space. I remember going to my first managing editor in '81, Craig Elson, and he was explaining what we were covering. And he talked about the two junior C hockey teams. We talked about Brian Orser. We talked about Angela Schmidt, who was a cross country skier, an Olympic cross country skier, which is great. But we also talked about all the boys' high school stuff I was going to cover, and I said right from the beginning, I'm also covering women's high school sports. Okay. And he said, well, I'm not sure if there's a market for that. I said, well, then we'll make one. Right.
Good for you.
Right. And a guy who became such an important part of women's high school basketball, a guy by the name of Brig Harvey, was doing his first few years as a teacher before he went to Barrie, in Midland. So I immediately glommed onto his basketball team, his women's basketball team. And then when I went to the town crier, I did absolutely as much women's coverage as I possibly could. So those
Okay.
are the perspectives that I come from, which doesn't answer your question in the slightest. But the answer to the question is, yes, I do believe that there's a problem at the grassroots, but it's a good problem to have in an overall scheme of things. It's a problem for each individual sport, each individual organization. If you think back to when I started my career, if you were an athletic young woman, for an example, what were the choices available for you? Well, there wasn't any baseball. There was softball in specific areas, women's softball in specific areas. In Toronto, it would be the Beaches, Scarborough, west of Etobicoke, basically. So within certain areas. Um, and there was figure skating.
What about soccer or basketball or any of those sports at
Well,
the start of
soccer and
your career?
basketball weren't really coming up yet. They were just
Okay.
coming along. 2 years before the North Toronto Baseball Association started, a wonderful group of men in North Toronto started the North Toronto Soccer Association.
Okay.
Right, but you see, this is very much a grassroots organization, and it was really for boys, but they did say that if any girls wanted to come play, you could come play. It was the same thing with North Toronto baseball. Right from the very beginning, we said, if you're a girl and you want to come play, you can come and play with us, right? But it wasn't something that girls thought about getting involved in.
Was your
So,
point of view considered revolutionary at the time?
oh my God, it got me in trouble. Well, trouble's not the right word. It got me a lot of raised eyebrows.
Okay.
And I used to have some raised eyebrows, and I used to have so much fun with it. Because one of the things that I did, and anybody who's my age, or within 20 years of me, who remembers the town crier, we had
I sure do.
we had a Leaside Rosedale, we had a North Toronto, which was North Toronto and North Toronto and Lawrence Park. We had a Forest Hill. We had the Annex, right? So we had all these town criers. But one of the things I used to do every fall, and then after January, is I would do the boys' high school hockey preview
Yep.
in January. And in the fall, I would do the boys' high school football preview. But we happen to have in North Toronto, especially in the North Toronto and Forest Hill areas, we happen to have some of the strongest girls' schools around.
Okay.
We had Havergal and Branksome Hall and Bishop Strawn and St. Clement's and all these schools.
Private girl schools.
Yep. And all the private girl schools had field hockey teams.
Yes, they did.
So what I did was, in addition to doing the boys football preview, I also did a girls field hockey preview. Same amount of space, same setup, same photos, same thing, how they did last year, what players have you lost, who are your new players, comments from the coach, right? And then a guess of what their record might be and that sort of stuff. But I don't think it necessarily, and I don't think it had a lot of people. Some people question the amount of space that was going into it, but boy, we made a lot of money from those private schools, girls' schools advertising in our paper.
I bet.
So they deserve to have some coverage, but women deserve coverage anyway.
Yes. So let me ask you this, Malcolm.
And I still haven't answered your question.
I know. Well, it's okay. I'm going to change the question a little bit, and I'm going to put your feet to the fire. So
she's going to coax the answer out of me one way or the other, folks.
We've known each other a long time. I know what I need to do.
Yes.
So here's the thing. If we're struggling with attracting people to sport, whatever sport you want, and it's not just girls and it's not just boys, it seems to be everybody. I want you to give me your top three possibilities in terms of reasons why that is.
Well, the first thing we would have to do is to understand and accept, despite the fact we think so much of each other, that I don't accept your premise.
Okay.
I don't believe that we're struggling to get kids into sports.
Okay.
I think what's happening is individual sports organizations are having a problem attracting young people to their sport.
Correct.
And
the same thing.
And the reason that I believe that's happened is because if you compare even to 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when we were younger, there were far less number of options available. And now parents have options like, over their heads. You're drowning in options of things that you can do.
I never thought of that.
Right. So you have hockey options. You have figure skating options. You have basketball options through Basketball Ontario. You have volleyball options through Volleyball Ontario.
Yeah.
You have you have everything you can think of that is a sport, right? And there are big ones, obviously, soccer being at the top, and softball and baseball and hockey and all that sort of stuff.
And
But every
football.
single sport you can think of has a really amazing youth organization.
Actually, that's in my mind not exactly true. I find that in some organizations, they're not addressing the needs of the youth, but I never thought about um, um, the fact that with all of these choices, when I look at, BMX freestyle, when I look at all the different BMX
Yes, there's another one.
options, when I look at skateboard, when I
Yes,
look at,
skateboarding.
breakdancing, there are all these different options that were not considered Olympic sports before. It's kind of like, Malcolm, when you and I were kids, there were the three American networks, and there was CTV and CBC, and then the upstart City TV. So those were our options in terms of watching television. And I know that the television people have found that their audience has been split all over the place with all of the different options there are to pull up entertainment on your screen, on your television, on your wherever. So I never thought about sports being having maybe the same problem. Is that, what do you want to do? Well, I want to do this, and this, where there used to be, you're right, not even soccer, not even basketball back when we were kids. So your options were
Especially not
limited.
for young women.
Well, for lots of people though,
Yeah.
for lots of people, like everybody, really everybody, start to finish. So my other big question, in terms of what I wanted to ask on this Sports Clamor podcast, prod is because I'm prodding you to answer.
Yes, you are.
What do you think? I think that there could be ramifications beyond registrations for different sports. So I think that, for instance, getting your students to be able to cover sport, if there aren't very interesting athletes or stories coming up because, the well is kind of dry in terms of participants, I think that that's a possible outcome. How do you see it?
I don't see that at all. I see
Okay.
there's being lots and lots of things for them to do. Our program believes so deeply in experiential learning. We have them out there all the time, but we have
Yep.
them out there all the time covering as many different things as we could possibly do. One of our focuses in the latter part of this first semester was cricket. And what we wanted to do was we assigned each student in the class an Indian Premier League, that's T20 cricket, and a team, right?
Yep.
And we asked them to keep up on the team and how they were doing, how their best players, and it became very competitive because
Yep.
one person's team would be playing another person's team that afternoon, and they really got into it. And what struck me as amazing and interesting about it is that if you give people the knowledge of something, they'll love it. But I believe that as we expand, there's more and more things. Now, I do believe in some ways, and please forgive me for assigning an opinion to you. I apologize for that in advance. Your background, your huge area of interest, of course, is figure skating.
Yep.
And I would never speak for you when it comes to figure skating.
You might. Let's face facts.
But I can't. Okay, but only behind your back. The if we can deal with figure skating, because I have opinions on figure skating, but on some of the things that have happened to figure skating, but I don't believe they necessarily expand out to other sports. A problem that we are going to have in Toronto and in Canada, but especially in Toronto, is oversaturation of a market.
Okay.
Right. And it is, for an example, very, very expensive. Depending on the game, it can be quite expensive for people to take their girls to, say, a PWHL game, a professional women's hockey league game.
Okay.
And the tickets are a bit tough to get. But we also now have the National Soccer League that just kicked off last night.
Courtesy of Diana Matheson. Hey, Diana, holla.
Holla. The NSL just tipped off last night in Vancouver. They had, I think, around 15,000 fans for that. And I know they have sold all 14,000 available tickets because they're only using the bottom bowl for Toronto's debut. But you also have, so many other things that are happening. And next year you've got a WNBA team coming in, the Toronto Tempo.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things from that way. But in terms of a grassroots thing, even if you don't have a lot of money, and you know this, I grew up working class in England and working poor here in Canada. Even if you don't, my parents, for example, could not afford to put me in hockey. They put me in for a couple of years when I was about 8 or 9, and then when I grew out of the equipment, they couldn't afford any more equipment. So, and hockey didn't have those exchange things that they have now, where
Yep.
where you pass down equipment. So but they could afford to put me in softball and baseball because all I needed was a glove.
Yep.
Right. So then I could run out and shout out to the Don Victoria Softball Association and the East York Baseball Association because they could afford to put me in them. Right. So there's always things that people can do.
Is there an accessibility
Soccer's
problem?
very inexpensive.
Well, yes, but also
Shout out to Diana Matheson.
I have another question, and that is about sort of society and the way we view sports. Are we giving it enough credibility, let's say? Because
Yes.
I think that the lessons that are learned through sport are invaluable for young people.
Oh, yes. And I'm a full believer in this. And God knows I pushed my son to get involved in sports, and he hated all team sports, and wound up in and here's another sport coming, by the way, that I can bring up. But he wound up in martial arts.
Yeah,
and he wound up as a black belt in Taekwondo and karate. Right,
which was not a thing when you and I were kids.
Right, so that was and then I went along with him because I thought, well, if he's going, I'll go, and so that's how I got my black belt in Taekwondo, is because I just followed him along, right? And I think there's a lot of that happening now too. But I'd like to circle back. May I, as the host, permission to circle back, madam?
All right, just this once.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to circle back to figure skating because I was really thinking about this to prepare for this. My respect for you meant that I actually put some thought into this. When I was younger, say when I was first covering sports, I would speak to, say, at the Midland Figure Skating Club or the Penetang Figure Skating Club, or later the other clubs that I would go to, and I would ask parents, why are you putting your 4-year-old boy, for an example, into figure skating? Because I want him to learn to skate properly before I put him into hockey.
Yep, all true.
That was huge. But you can't accuse hockey associations of being dumb. They saw that. So at the same time that the Timbits hockey programs came along,
yep,
the hockey associations realized that they were going to have to actually introduce power skating for little kids in order to make sure that their kids were able to skate properly, and of course the invention of the molded skate helped that, but that they were going to be able to learn to skate properly, but also that they weren't taking their money off the figure skating organizations and spending it there. So it was both a need decision and economic decision.
Well, they're different skills, though, I have to tell you. Learn to skate and power skating are very different.
Right. But they were like introducing learn to skate and all those sorts of things. And it's funny we should bring up the power skating too, because what was the first way? Do you know? I mean, I'm sure you know. You're a figure skater. Of course you know. The first way that women broke into pro hockey at the men's level, at the NHL level, into hockey organizations, what was it?
It was probably power skating. I'm thinking Barb Underhill and Toronto.
Yes, it was Barbara Underhill teaching
Yep.
power skating to young Toronto Maple Leafs who had never been taught to skate properly.
Yep.
Because when they were kids at that time, and I think Barb started 20 years ago, 25 years ago?
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe 25. Yeah,
Was
a
it
long
5
time.
years ago? Yes, and all the teams. I
World
remember.
champion pair skater for people who don't know, along with partner Paul Martini, if they
Yes,
don't know the
well,
name.
yeah, well, Barbara and Hill was a skater. And then that became a thing because when Barb decided she wouldn't do it anymore, the Leafs went get somebody else and they got another figure skater, right? And because figure skaters, surprisingly enough, know how to skate.
It's like
And
David Peltier and the Oilers.
yes, exactly.
Rebecca
But
Babb and I think it's Detroit, but I'm not sure. There
right,
are
but
all kinds of figure
right,
skaters
but
that are doing power skating.
these are all but when Barb did it, it was unique. It was unbelievable. And there really were people who were saying, a girl is teaching guys how to skate. Yeah, because she can skate and they can't. Right.
Skate rings around them.
Yeah.
Okay, Malcolm, though, we have to come back to sort of like the question at hand because we're quickly running out of time.
Which I still haven't answered.
So I want to know,
Sure.
if you were the head of a sports organization, let's say, or a league or a business, and you needed to get more people coming in at the bottom of the pyramid, in other words, the grassroots, give me 3 quick things you would do. And when I say quick, I'm not fooling around, Kelly.
1, promotion.
Okay.
2, exposure.
Okay.
3, acceptance.
Okay.
There you
I
go.
also think that accessibility has got to be one.
Yeah, but accessibility, yes, I mean, I agree, but accessibility, accessibility might fit into my second part there, but because to
Okay.
me, accessibility works on so many different levels.
Yep,
And
that's
to
true.
me, the highest of the levels that is involved in accessibility is cost.
Okay,
That's
fair.
the
Yep.
highest thing.
Yep.
And there's no way around it. Figure skating, once you get to a certain level, is expensive.
Do you know what? Every sport, once you get to a certain level, is expensive because
Yes, that's a good point. Oh my God, I agreed with her.
I know that's shocking. Everybody,
Yes.
quick, 27:11. Yeah, that's when it
Yeah,
happened.
20. Yeah, what? Somebody mark that time. Yes.
Because in truth, if you are at the elite level of anything, I don't
Yes, I
care if
agree.
all you need is a
Absolutely.
baseball glove. At the elite
Absolutely.
level, there are things that have to happen.
Yeah. And
So,
why? Traveling.
yeah, well, not only traveling but coaching.
Yeah, coaching, being able to pay for better coaches, being able to
Yep.
get, yeah, you're absolutely correct. And so perhaps if we could conclude, perhaps the way that you, part of your promotion of it is to have people understand that when you first get started, this is not expensive.
Yeah.
Yes. And be honest and say that, yes, as you just said, yes, like absolutely every sport in the world. When you get to a certain level, the costs start to get much higher.
Yeah.
Okay. And everybody just accepts that. Right. And I think parents aren't dumb. I mean, parents understand. Well, okay, some are, but parents understand. But there are some coaches. Parents understand. That they understand the idea that if the kid's any good at anything, including piano, it's going to start to get expensive.
Well, look at the McIntosh family.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
One's an elite level figure skater. One's an elite level swimmer, and the parents have to divide their time between the one in the northern climate and the one having to train in the southern climate. So
right.
That's what I applaud parents who can
but
do that.
Right. But at the beginning, there's learn to swim programs,
Yeah.
learn to skate programs,
Yes.
learn to play hockey programs, all those things. Hockey's still more expensive. But you can get involved and not have it be too expensive from the start.
Okay, Malcolm, I'm going to give you the last word.
That's never happened.
Yeah, I know. Well, I want you to summarize what contribution you think sports makes to society. Huge. And Canadian society, if you want to be specific.
Yeah, but that's a softball question.
I don't care.
Because, yes,
my podcast.
It makes a huge, yes, of course it is. I thought I got the last word here.
That is the last word.
It was, yes, it's absolutely huge, and nobody's going to argue that. Only a fool would argue that. Of course, it makes a huge contribution to people's health and their wellness and their well-being. I've got 10 seconds, and their well-being and how they feel about themselves and their mental health and all the rest of it.
You know what? That was very well put. Very well put.
You see, I
love that,
told you
Malcolm.
I wasn't going to get the last word.
So Malcolm Kelly, if people want to follow you, they should go to Facebook and or X. We didn't even have a chance to talk about many of your other books. You are an absolutely legendary author, and I am very proud to call you friend. I just want to thank you so much for talking to me today.
It was my pleasure, Grandma.
Thank you. Bye for now, Malcolm Kelly. And for everybody else, I want you to make sure that you follow us on the Sports Clamor podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcast. I'm PJ Kwong. Thank you for watching.